Hey, what's up guys, it's Jace, and we're back with another exciting episode of the ELAV8 podcast. We took a quick little break and we were focusing on some stuff in the back end. Sam moved, and you know what? We thought it would be a great opportunity to come back with an emergency podcast relevant to what is happening in the Bitcoin markets. We have welcomed guest Chris Fenwick on to try to help him navigate this wonderful ecosystem and maybe answer a few of your questions. Let's check it out. What Bitcoin allows is it allows you to be in complete control of your sovereign wealth with no intermediaries, and you're able to send value to whomever you want at any given time, and you don't need a bank account to do that.
Bitcoin is a scarce asset, and in many ways it mimics what gold is, which is being a scarce, mutually agreed upon asset that other people have assigned value to. And that scarcity is significantly higher relative to the American dollar, which the government just keeps printing more and more, which devalues the overall supply. So if you want to know why your dollar becomes less, it's because they printed a lot more.
And this is how finance works. This is how the law works. This is how politics work. If I can confuse you, I can rule you.
What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the ELAV8 podcast. We took a quick little siesta, quick little break, because we needed one, right? We needed one. We're back in the studio with Sam Messman and our guest, Chris Fenwick. First of all, Sam, how are you doing? Where you're at? What's going on?
I'm at my mom's house in Alabama, believe it or not. Back fresh off the back of taking her to some Native American reservations. We've had a road trip. She's always wanted to do it out in New Mexico. It's been an adventure, but now I'm here, and then I bought a house, doing all kinds of stuff, becoming a grown up while apparently the world just seemingly falls apart around me. I don't know. I mean, is there anything new? What have we missed? There's nothing going on in the world right now, right, guys?
Nothing.
Not much.
Nothing. Very boring. But hey, the reason why I'm calling this the emergency podcast, and I'm calling it the emergency podcast for a reason, is Chris periodically texts me his ideas, his musings. Chris, what were you texting me about the other day? Was it gold?
Well, eventually got to gold. I don't know what started. It was probably me teasing you about your truck. But somehow we got into just financial security. And I'm sitting here living large in the 80s, and you guys are living in the 21st century, apparently. I mentioned to Jace that I had this revelation about money just in general. And, there's so much talk politically and just sociologically about inflation, especially here in the States. And actually, I don't know what's going on in the rest of the world, but in the States, like, stuff is stupid expensive. Gas got super high. I think they artificially bring it down before an election so they can say, hey, look at what a good job we did putting it back where it was. But in the United States, like somebody posted something that a specific pumpkin pie that's available every year from some restaurant here across the bay here in San Francisco, which last year was like $54, is now $80. For a pumpkin pie. Like, what the hell? And so I said to Jace, I came to this realization, and I think I tweeted it a couple of weeks ago, that things are not more expensive. Our money is worth less. And it means that things cost more, but it's just because our dollar is worth less. And I was listening to this guy on the YouTubes, and he held up a pre-1964 silver dollar. We used to call them silver dollars, the coins. And the reason we called them silver dollars is they were made of silver. And he said, when I was a kid in 1967, his grandparents had given him a silver dollar, and he was dumb, and he took it to the hobby shop and he bought a model car for $1. You can't buy a similar model today for $1, but you can buy it if you walked in with a silver dollar.
Do you want to hear
the silver
really
dollar is still worth as much? So
you just said how there's two things. Well, first point is you just said that your pumpkin pie went from $54 to $80.
To be clear, my pumpkin pie, I don't eat pumpkin pie.
A pumpkin pie, a very high-end pumpkin pie. I don't know, but that went from $54 to $80. 1 year time span. What's really interesting about that? That's about a 1/3 increase, give or take. The price of gold has gone from $1,800 to $2,700, which is about the same proportion that your
Good point,
pumpkin
roughly.
pie
Yep.
went up. So your gold still buys the same pumpkin pie. Is basically gold is pegged to the value of pumpkin pie, whereas the dollar is inflating at an exponential rate. And so if you want to know why people are buying gold and they're buying Bitcoin, it's for exactly this reason, because they are inflation proof.
And again, I think that the social programming of using the word inflation is deceptive, because the things, although they appear to be more expensive, it's really just because our money is worth less.
Do you want to know why? So this is and then I'm going to tee Jace up here. So there's one book you need to read after this. So anybody listening to this, there's a single book that's going to terrify you and will make you a little bit angry. But it's called The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Yeah.
Oh, there he is. Look at that. So that's going to basically explain all of this. And from there, I'm going to turn it over to Jace.
Oh, man. Well, so first of all, Sam, doesn't it feel good that society's waking up? When I received this text from Chris, I'm like, dude, this is exactly what we've been talking about. This is great. Yeah. This is perfect. This is everything we've talked about, and it's finally happening. And by the way, I would like to give you major props. You said that people would start waking up closer to the election. You did say that it was like 3 podcasts ago. So what, like 3 months ago, you started talking about this moment in time. So I have to give you major props. You were prescient and you're right on the money. So yeah, you're right. That book explains everything. And Chris, your premise is absolutely correct. And it's all about government spending. That's what inflation actually is. It's government spending. How much spending are we putting into the economy? Because it's the greatest silent tax on Americans specifically that affects the entire planet. And the concept of what you're talking about, you said specifically, I don't know whether or not inflation is kicking off in other countries, but since the US dollar is the global standard, if you will, is that your proximity to the money printer is what will yield the best results to you. What do you mean so far?
So far, until BRICS takes over.
Oh man, don't even get us started on BRICS.
Well, I think if we're going to talk about monetary policy, because that's kind of what we're doing here, we haven't really. Basically, Jason and I were talking, and he started mentioning Bitcoin. I go, oh, that's right. You told me that when we had dinner that time in LA, that you were heavy into the Bitcoin, or as I like to call it, the coin. And I said, we should do. I don't understand Bitcoin. I don't. To me, Bitcoin makes as much sense as investing.
Can I simplify this? I'm going to tell you exactly why. How many millionaires are there in the United States?
Chris? I don't know. There's the 3 of us, and I'm sure there's a few others.
So, okay. So there's, at last count, maybe the numbers changed, but there were 24 million millionaires in the United States. There's more now. Jace says the number's gone higher, so Price is Right, it's higher.
He's either saying go 50. Higher or raise a tiny bit of the roof.
Oh yeah, both. It's over 50 actually.
It's over 50 now. So there's over 50 million millionaires. That's one country's number of millionaires, and that's a solid barometer of wealth. Question for you, Chris, is do you know how many Bitcoin there will ever be? Ever. Maximum.
I know that the Beanie Baby factory turns off after they make enough Beanie Babies. Yes.
21 million Bitcoin will ever be made.
Yeah, so, and then they close down the factory.
As a store of value, as holding on to something that has now been widely accepted by not just the American public, but worldwide as a means of trade and storing value, there will only be 21 million of those ever. There's already 50 million millionaires. So if you had to think of a place to park assets that's based on scarcity, and scarcity is what matters when it comes to wealth. The reason no one buys seashells is because seashells are not scarce unless you go to a place where there's no, beaches, right? Ocean. So you're going to, and so that essentially, or it's like grains of sand. No, if you're surrounded by grains of sand, they're not going to be scarce. But Bitcoin is a scarce asset. And in many ways, it mimics what gold is, which is being a scarce, mutually agreed upon asset that other people have assigned value to. And that scarcity is significantly higher relative to the American dollar, which the government just keeps printing more and more, which devalues the overall supply. So if you want to know why your dollar becomes less, it's because they printed a lot more. And they keep doing that. Whereas the Bitcoin, the number of Bitcoins, that's not getting higher. So the number of dollars it requires to buy a Bitcoin relative to the supply of the dollar, it's why Bitcoin value goes up. Outside of the emotional aspect of it, is there's a scarcity side of this, which is what fixes the value.
So you said two things there. Actually, you said a lot of things, but two things that I keyed in on were mutually agreed upon.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have widely accepted and mutually agreed upon. The thing that I've never understood about Bitcoin is there were people that were all jacked up about this way before it was mutually agreed upon that this is a valuable currency or something worth trading. It was just a bunch of computer nerds that said, hey, let's just say Beanie Babies are expensive. And, you know, the reason I mentioned the Beanie Baby thing, do you remember back in like the year 2000 when you couldn't turn on your UHF dial on your TV without seeing some moron saying, oh, this is the best. This is the Valentine's Day Beanie Baby. And they're only going to make so many of these alleged scarcity. And we're selling this. We're going to let it go. We're going to let these go. We only have a few for $125 a piece. It's a $4 toy you buy at the hospital gift shop.
So I want to key on a few things, right? Because you're going down the right path. And Sam, thank you for such a great, succinct introduction, was the consensus piece. The consensus piece is the absolute most important piece of this whole entire equation, because the consensus piece is censorship resistant. As long as there's internet, all right, Bitcoin will always be up. And this is really important, right? So you can give an example. Jace, what about China, right? They have, IP addresses blocked off to where it's like, the Iron Dome. You can't get in, you can't get out. Well, there's a global ledger. So if you are in a censored country that doesn't allow participation in Bitcoin natively, just because you don't have access to your coins just to be able to transfer them or send them, because you control your seed phrase, you control your wallet, you literally still have access to your funds. They don't go anywhere. You always have access to your funds.
So hold on. You just jumped into the deep end, and I'm looking for my water wings here.
Fair enough.
So you seed phrase wallet. My wallet's sitting on the desk. So I know a little bit about this, but if indeed this is Bitcoin 101 or Bitcoin for the dummy or dummies, then so explain a little bit. And huge concern, as you said, as long as you have internet. Did you follow all the stuff about the giant solar flares and potential of a CME, a coronal mass ejection? What happens to your wealth, your value, if the internet turns black because the earth is ruined by a solar flare?
Well, the same thing that happens to all your dollars, Chris, which is your dollars are just numbers on a screen at this stage of the game. We're gone cashless. So
no, that's not true. I always have dollars nearby. And they have a perceived value.
Those will become way more valuable when that goes down.
But I think the genesis of this discussion started when I said to Jace that, dude, I'm seriously looking at putting a bunch of my green into precious metals like gold and silver and
you should.
Lead.
So diversify. If I were you, I would diversify at the moment between cash, gold and silver, and Bitcoin and blue chip cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. But I want to touch base on something real quick, because let's assume that, multiple people don't know what Chris just pointed out, which is like a seed phrase. So I just want to make sure we cover just the basics real quick. Like, what's a public key? What's a private key? What's a seed phrase? Let's just make sure we know what these three things are. Because if you understand these three concepts, you actually understand what Bitcoin is. All right. Your seed phrase is essentially like your password. Think about it as your password, a very, very, very long password that you can input into the network and you can retrieve your coins, right? That's what a seed phrase is, a one-to-one comparison. A public key, all right, is your address, just like your account number. When you send money using Zelle or Venmo or whatever, you send currency to that account number. You send it to that public key. Your private key is your seed phrase. And you can only access what's in your public key, your account number, if you control the private key, aka your seed phrase. Does that make sense? Kind of.
That's okay. We don't need to get all the way there. We could do some of this later.
It's passwords to get to my account.
Correct.
There it is. But the key is, right, it's passwords to get to your account the same way you have a Bank of America password and some of these other things. There's things you have to get over in order to access your funds. And you can't just, and actually the best equivalent I can give you would be in the US banking system or the SWIFT banking system. You have account numbers and routing numbers, that will direct traffic. So you have your keys on the crypto side would be the same thing. Whereas the seed phrase would be essentially your password that unlocks, your bank account. So that's your thing to get access to your funds. Whereas the routing number and account number in Swift banking would be how people wire you to and from, which would equivalent, to the public keys.
So do you know why this is important, Chris? I'm going to give you one specific
Clearly, I
example
don't.
why this is important. Do you remember the Canadian trucker protests? Is that fresh in your mind?
Yeah, it was 2020?
2020, 21, something like that. But you remember what I'm referring to, correct?
Yeah,
Do you remember what happened? Do you remember what happened when people donated to the Canadian protester?
Yeah, they turned off their bank accounts, didn't they?
Exactly. At that moment, that should have terrified everyone. And there's a great quote about free speech that I really like, right? Which is, free speech only matters if it enables the people you disagree with to still have a voice, right? That's
Right.
when free speech actually matters, right? And I was not for or against the Canadian protesters because I live in America and it wasn't really an issue that affected me. But what really concerned me was that the people that disagreed with the Canadian truckers, they debanked the people trying to fund them. And this is why Bitcoin matters, right? Put inflation as a tick. That's like one thing we discussed. But the censorship resistance of the network itself is what matters the most, because it is a way that you can send value across the internet with, by the way, no limits, right? Because if you don't forget, if you send someone more than $10,000, you have to report that, right? You can't fly on a plane with more than $10,000, right? There's limitations placed on how you can send your money to where you want to send it, how you can store your money, how you want to store it. And what Bitcoin allows is it allows you to be in complete control of your sovereign wealth with no intermediaries. And you're able to send value to whomever you want at any given time. And you don't need a bank account to do that. All you have to do is be able to memorize your seed phrase. You don't even necessarily need a computer. If you can keep your seed phrase in your head, which I wouldn't recommend, you have as much money within your private key as that is associated with that address. And
Is the
that's
seed
why
phrase is the seed phrase the string of seemingly unconnected
Correct.
words?
Yes.
A friend of mine who used to travel, John Preto, hey John, used to travel all over the world lecturing about Bitcoin. When I told him I was going to do this, he just laughed. He goes, "You're an idiot. You're going to look like a moron on that podcast."
No.
It's true because he's been. I've had these conversations and I still don't get it. As a matter of fact, he even set up an Ethereum wallet for me.
Love that.
Let's pause there. So what is it specifically that you have a hard time with? Where is it confusing?
Yeah, no, I mean, I get the mechanics of it. You pick some sort of a company that holds your wallet, and I don't. The wallet John set up for me is called Wallet. The app is called Wallet. Not the Apple one. It's on my phone. He told me, be careful with these words. And part of the reason why we did it is we were experimenting with what was that scam a few years ago where people were selling like JPEGs and GIFs for hundreds of dollars? What was that one called?
They're called NFTs.
NFTs.
I have a whole rant on those.
Whole nother internet scam. Anyway, we did that. Yeah. We were just experimenting with, again, the mechanics of how do you do it? You make a thing, you upload it, whatever. And then I sold it to him. And, you can like make up your own price, whatever. So, I mean, I understand the mechanics of it. So he set me up the account. I have my words, which I almost lost. I had to go to an old computer and find the notepad that's on my desktop. Actually, hold on. I got to show you something here.
For those who are watching, never store your seed phrase online. Just so we're clear.
Yeah.
Bad practices. Practices.
Whatever.
You never do that.
On the back of one of my computers here that I'm sitting in front of is a Post-it that says password. And my joke is, oh no, I just put my passwords on Post-its. But my trick is I put them on the back of the computer. So anyway, it's not online. It was on my desktop. Yes, I understand that can be whatever. There was only like $100 in it, but I mean, I get the functionality of it, but I don't understand why it goes up. I don't understand why it goes down. I don't understand what was the thing. I think Jace, you'd mentioned this to me when we had dinner that day in LA. Something there's an occurrence that happens every so often where the halving. Yeah, I don't understand things that use weird words that make no sense. And that's like who
does it make less sense though than the term quantitative easing?
No, but it does not make less sense than that, but most people aren't even aware of that phrase. I'm only aware of it because I did a lot of
problem.
Yeah. No, I get that. They're not aware of it, so they are paying, $6 for gas now.
I'm just simply saying the mechanism is the same, right? And if you step back a second, and this is just store of value, and it's all fundamentally a confidence game, right? So this is all about where do people feel comfortable putting their money. Currencies are just pieces of paper, or formerly in ancient times, stone slabs. And when you think about all of this, like the American dollar began as something that used to have gold. They used to be the dollar originated is because gold was too heavy for people to carry around, so they didn't want to do that. So they made these little pieces of paper that you could redeem for gold. Can you redeem these little pieces of paper for gold anymore?
Not since Richard Nixon. No.
So because you can't do that outside of our trust, outside of just our being used to passing around pieces of paper that aren't even pieces of paper, that are just numbers on a screen at this point, is there anything backing the US dollar besides I'm used to using it?
No, you're 100% right. And I completely agree with you. And we both have our concerns and skepticism about our financial system. Jace, I'd like to touch on this just a second. Much of the world trades using the US dollar. What was the phrase what's the phrase that they call it? I mentioned earlier BRICS, and BRICS is BRICS is a new trading standard. It stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Yep.
And many, many other nations are actually siding with BRICS. And I think the real concern is if like trading oil and worldwide, trends, if people start moving to BRICS, the US dollar will be totally worthless because we've lost that what'd you call it, Sam? Mutually agreed upon.
It's going to be worth less, right? It's just going to be another reserve currency. Because here's the thing about BRICS: it's not better. It's just another. It's another
It's mutually
franchise
agreed upon. It's mutually agreed upon.
by a
If
certain set of
everybody
people.
says, if everybody says we only want to trade using BRICS dollars,
But let's step back one step further, and then I'm going to let Jace dive in here. So, behind whether it's BRICS or whether it's SWIFT, or you could say one is NATO and one is, sort of the China-backed side of things. Here's a simple question for you: do any of those nations across either of those reserve countries not have a central bank? They all have a central bank. And if you look at, just go type this in, Google this afterwards, the most amount of debt owed to central banks, and just do it on a country by country level. Which two countries have the highest amount of debt owed to central banks?
no clue.
China and the US. Actually, the US is number one, China's number two.
That
And so
makes
if you
sense.
really want to understand how all of this works, this is just a shell game. And the shells basically are money owed to central banks and currencies, and how that money flows through these various countries into central banks. So you have to look at the underlying mechanism. And these are two franchises, basically SWIFT and BRICS, but it's the same system, and it's just debtors owing creditors. The creditors are central banks. So who really owns all of this, and who really owns all of the fiat currency on the planet? Central banks. And then you have to look at who owns the central banks and how that system works. And then you understand our current economic model.
Yeah,
So,
then you
Sam,
get into
before we go
the
further-
Jekyll Island story.
Yep.
So just a real quick question. Sam, is the Federal Reserve a part of America?
No,
Believe it or
no.
not.
The question,
No.
the leading question is which branch of the U.S. government governs the Federal Reserve Bank? That's the leading question you ask.
And every time you ask that question, you're going to get a puzzled stare from the person you asked it to, because there's no answer to that question, because they don't.
Well,
Yeah.
the bigger problem is that most people don't know the three branches of the U.S. government, but that's a whole nother issue. You're right. It is not a part of the federal government, nor is Federal Express. Clever name, but not a part of the federal government.
Okay, we're going to go deep for a second. Please disprove any of what I'm about to tell you, because I want it disproven for me.
Okay.
Please. Do you want to know how our entire financial system works? It's in this book, chapter 10 of The Creature from Jekyll Island. Please disprove any of this, and I'll feel way better. Here's how it all works. It's just a magic trick. It's 3-card money going 2 ways, right? So the way that all of our finances work is the US government, instead of saying we want to raise taxes, they go to the central bank and say, hey, we need more money. And central bank's like, okay, in order for us to print more money, we need something that we can call an asset. So they're like, how do we solve this problem together? So the federal government then issues a bond to the central bank, also known as an IOU, right? Which is the federal government is going to say, we're going to pay you back a bunch of money, right? And they say, so they hand the IOU over to the central bank. The central bank says, oh, that's an asset, right? So we can charge interest on that. So we can charge interest on your IOU, which allows us to print money up so that we can then hand it to the federal government. So the federal government can then spend it into the economy, stimulate the economy. Meanwhile, based on that asset, the central bank can then charge interest and give loans out to other banks, the sub banks, based on this. And so you have two areas where now you've made money out of nothing that then flows into the economy, that then gets deposited on the one side back by the American public as they get distributed the currency. This flows into banks. They deposit this in banks. The banks can then charge interest on all of this as they give loans. Meanwhile, the banks are able to credit and loan out money to the other banks that they can charge interest from the sub banks to. So this is all a debt-based system out of a simple magic trick of the American government writing an IOU to the Federal Reserve. There was never any money.
Is that?
What is that? Oh, there it is.
Audio.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's ready.
So with that in mind, please disprove everything I just said, but just know it's all a shell game.
No, I obviously can't. But here is the trick, if you will. And this is how finance works. This is how the law works. This is how politics work. If I can confuse you, I can rule you.
Yes.
And so you make a system that's complicated enough that the majority, and I'm going to say the vast majority of people just throw up their hands and go, I don't know. Can I just get a raise so I can buy groceries? Like, that's all people, that's all people care about. Can I feed my kids, and can I put gas in the car, and maybe once in a while, once every 10 years, take the kids or the grandkids to Disneyland? Did you know Disneyland has a page on their website for financing now?
I mean, dude, Apple literally has a pay later button on their wallet app. So everybody's financing everything. And this is a common theme that Sam and I talk about often, which is credit card debt. I don't know if you know this, but it hit the highest levels that it's ever hit in history. And the only reason we're not in the Great Depression is because in the Great Depression, there was no such thing as credit cards, right? Literally, there was no debt-based system for retail. And
Sam, there was no credit cards when I was born. That was invented in my lifetime. I'm a bit older.
So this is where, if you think about the ramifications of this massive Ponzi scheme, and you think Bernie Madoff was a Ponzi scheme, this is a Ponzi scheme of such epic proportions that it's incalculable. The only problem was that the Ponzi scheme is so enormous that everybody has to pretend that it's not happening. And the problem is now there's competing Ponzi schemes. And so everybody has to determine which Ponzi scheme is their favorite and then park all of their imaginary assets into that Ponzi scheme. And so what we're seeing right now is the war of the Ponzi schemes versus real assets. And the real assets at the moment are finite and scarce, and that's gold, that's Bitcoin, that's silver. And so where are those assets being parked in the various Ponzi schemes, which is all fiat currency is? That's the question people are waking up to right now.
Do you want to hear something that keeps me up at night?
What's that?
So you guys have been talking about precious metals a little bit, and I know I talked about it on our first podcast with Sasha, Sam, and so I kind of opened the door a little bit for people, but people don't really realize that space is about to become over a $30 trillion business. And the reason why it's going to become a $30 trillion business, and I promise you, I'm going to thread the needle and bring it all back home to our current topic, is that the reason why precious metals have value is because they are finite, right? Well, in space, they are not finite. They are not. And we're about to start going to mine meteors. And this is within a decade, not like 100 years from now. Within a decade, we're going to start mining meteors and asteroids that are passing by. And that finite amount of lithium, that finite amount of precious metals are no longer finite. And so digital currency is literally intergalactic. It is a finite thing that is going to be able to not only remain here on Earth as a terrestrial currency, it's going to be an extraterrestrial currency for all of humanity once we leave this planet. And
that
that's
just
why
blew
I'm
my
so
mind,
passionate
Jace.
about it. Yeah, I know.
So let's talk about all the different.
Yeah.
Let's talk about all the movies that rested on mining meteors. The Avatar was basically going to a planet and taking things. What was the one with Bruce Willis? What's that?
Armageddon. So unobtainium is Avatar.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Armageddon. Right. That's it. That's the other one with Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
Now here's a question I've got though to disrupt this whole idea, right? Because what this idea of scarcity, right, is that these metals would be scarce so that you can buy things that you can't have. But my point, and we mentioned this on the podcast, right, is if you think about how the way our economy is structured, right? And what are we all taught to be? We're taught to be consumers, right?
Mhm.
We're taught to be these things that just consume, right? It's just how much can you devour, right? And so we have these devouring hordes fixed on scarce amounts of packaging that we all run through the supermarket to go grab various things that are in boxes, right? But like, and we have so many people who live in food deserts, and there's poverty and all of these things. But the reason for all of this is because we're all being taught to consume versus create. And if we actually sat down and started to create the things that we were consuming versus just being taught to just consume more and more and be this like cancerous horde that can't fend for itself, what would we need to buy?
Ask the Amish.
They're not dumb. They'll be around.
No. Yeah.
No notes. No notes.
No
Zero-
notes.
zero
I gotta
notes.
pee though. You guys can keep talking if you want, or you can edit this out.
No, like leave it in. Leave it in. No, dude, Sam, I would just like to touch on your predictions, right? We like prediction markets here, whether it be who's going to win the presidency to, when are people going to wake up? I think, and I said it earlier, I think you were dead on, man. You talked about price predictions. You actually did say Bitcoin would crash. I was like, no, we're going to the moon. It did crash. It did go into the 50s.
It did
right?
go
It did do
anywhere
it.
near as low as I thought it was going to go, though.
But you did call it. Like I gotta give major props to my dude here. You were right. And we're on the slow uptick again, and that's why we did our emergency podcast. Fenwick was texting me. He's like, dude, I love gold. I'm like, dude, don't you know Bitcoin's at $72,000 right now? And he's like, what? And
Is it going to moon though? So are we? The thing is, are we about to take the brakes off of things? Because I don't know. We're at such a weird inflection point right now. I don't know what the hell is going to happen. Like I'm literally sitting here and I'm like, all bets are off in the economy. I have no predictions. We could crash tomorrow. I would not be surprised. Bitcoin could go to 250,000 in 2 months. I would not be surprised. The printing press could just start exponentially. I would not be surprised. And things might just continue on for the next 6 months with nothing happening. And I would not be surprised. I'll believe.
Do you want the lay of the land? You want a current status of events? Okay.
Give me the
So
stats.
I'm about to be apolitical. This isn't me endorsing any candidate. It's just like these are the facts on the spectrum, right? It no longer matters which political party wins relevant to Bitcoin and Bitcoin specifically. Because both parties have realized they are fighting a losing battle. And no matter what, both candidates have promised. One's a little bit more bullish than the other, but it doesn't really matter. They've basically said that Bitcoin and crypto is here to stay. All right. It's inarguable. Kamala Harris's campaign put out a report saying like, yeah, we believe in Bitcoin. We're going to have regulations on it. Elizabeth Warren and her camp are going to help drive those regulations that are more, FinCEN based, that are going to be like, oh, all banks have these regulations. We think that institutions should have the same regulations. Whether that happens is inarguable. Donald Trump, however, is like pump it to the moon, right? We already know that. So it doesn't really matter which political party wins. We know that crypto's here to stay. So I'm going to give you a status update on the economy relevant to Bitcoin. And here's something that happened literally today, about 2 hours before we started filming. And one of the reasons why I was late, I was reading about it. Right now, Microsoft is having a vote through its shareholders whether or not that they should purchase Bitcoin as an underlying asset to have it on their books. All right. In Florida, Treasury, the Secretary of the Treasury of Florida, is now stating that pension funds should have Bitcoin within their portfolios, right? So you have localized economies, states that are stating that they should have it on the books. You have both political parties, right, that's saying that we should make this a major fundamental part of society. All right. Those are the two big things. And I'm going to give you two bonus things. And we talked about this on our last podcast, Sam, which is that Saudi Arabia has now allowed oil to be purchased by Bitcoin. It allowed, as you said, Chris, to be purchased by BRICS currencies. There is no U.S. reserve currency that's dictating the price of oil anymore. And that was within like the last 2 months. So you have that coming onto the global stage. And lastly, stock market institutions. We know that the ETFs have been greenlit people can buy a Bitcoin within their stock portfolios. They don't even have to actually have the coin itself. And Coinbase and Kraken and Gemini, they're doing all the custody and the custodial services behind it. So you don't have to have that complicated my seed phrase we talked about. You just literally buy it through your brokerage firm, which is pretty exciting. And like I just said, all these other institutions like BlackRock, Van Eck, anyone you can think of are saying, you know what, we want this a part of our portfolio for our retail investors. And that's becoming more mainstream. And the reason why I gave you this whole picture, right, is right now, if you look on the App Store, Coinbase is something like the 428th ranked app. All right, I'm gonna give you a prediction, and you can say, wow, man, Jace was dead on this. You're going to see the Coinbase app start ticking down. It's going to be within 300 to 200 within the next 2 weeks. And you're going to start seeing that drastically coming down. And right now, and this last point, is that there's roughly 6 to 7% of Americans that hold crypto. That number is going to creep up, whether they know it or not, up to 20% within the next year, because of all the things I just told you about, whether it be indirectly through holding Microsoft stock, because Microsoft might vote to pass that they have that within their books, or Tesla, who already has Bitcoin on their books. People indirectly are going to be exposed to Bitcoin, and this asset that we have kind of thrown off as like, that's kind of a niche thing, is going to go mainstream within the next 4 years in the next presidential election.
So let me throw out then, based on that, because I think that is dead on. Here is where I think things could get very interesting, right? Is, okay, we're all on the US dollar-based system, and the rest of the world is on all of these other fiat currencies. Everyone's using these fiat currencies. The only scenario I see for the US to find a way out of this is to standardize back on either Bitcoin or gold to be a Bitcoin or gold-backed currency, at which point you could have the central banks, the only magic rabbit they have to pull out of the hat, right, would be to say, okay, all of the money now needs to be backed by something. The cat's out of the bag. We've got it, but everyone's still using our dollars, right? So if we just suddenly say that you can cash in your dollars for Bitcoin or for crypto or for gold or whatever it is, and they say, hey, now you can redeem it this way. Think about what happens to those underlying assets the second, because there should be a race for all governments then to standardize on the underlying scarce commodity, to then have their money have value again, right? So if they don't do that, then it's just going to be paper. So these commodities, whatever everyone's going to standardize on, if that's Bitcoin, if that's what's going to run the world, underlying all of these currencies, because these currencies aren't going to go away, everyone's using them. What happens to the value if the American dollar, if the American government tomorrow says, okay, the only move that we have on the chessboard is to say Bitcoin is now the underlying asset. So we need to buy up and print up as many American dollars as possible to now buy as much Bitcoin as possible. And think about the feeding frenzy that then starts happening when the US government decides to print up all of the money to buy Bitcoin as this thing. And then all of the other governments get in a race. What happens to the value of those underlying assets?
Dude, you just described the magic trick. That's what I call it. It's the magic trick. And it's the magic trick to wipe out global debt, because that's exactly what's going to happen one day. And we're going to reiterate the point you just made, because that's exactly what's going to happen, is we're going to print a gigaton of money, just a gigaton, just print unlimited amounts of money. And people are going to freak out. Like, we're in $40 trillion of debt, right? They're not going to understand why we're doing it. And with a flick of a switch, they're going to flip over to the new global reserve currency, and that debt's gone because they bought up all the Bitcoin and they pay off the debt. Literally, they'll just pay it off. They're like, we printed all this money, we bought it. And you know what? Because we have the closest proximity to the printer, right? You didn't get an opportunity to buy it. They can literally wipe out their debt with one keystroke. It's crazy.
All they got to, no, but I don't think you guys hear yourself. Basically, you're talking about making one magic beanie baby. It's still not based in anything. It's just an agreement. We're all going to agree that this number on a computer is worth something. And hopefully our computers keep working.
Yes.
I mean, well, But you can take this offline. This is what people don't really understand, though.
No, you can't if there's no electricity or hard drives anymore because of a
Then it's
of
gold.
a-
Then it's cash. Then it's still the same system.
Okay.
Then it's still
okay.
your cash buys
Guys.
Bitcoin, and that's where the
Guys.
value comes from.
Guys, there's one thing that no one's talking about, and I realize I'm too close to it. Guys, Starlink exists. Satellites exist. A Bitcoin node can exist on a satellite. It can exist on a different planet, right?
Yeah.
This is what people don't understand. As long as the speed of light is in existence and there's a global ledger somewhere that is backed up, and it only has to be one computer. This is what people don't understand. You don't need thousands upon thousands upon thousands of computers. You just need one computer, and that computer doesn't have to be terrestrial. It could be on a
and
moon base.
access to it.
Well, fair enough, but this is what I just really
Think
wanna
that
amplify.
through, Jace. Think that
I am.
you rolled your eyes, you flung it away, you minimized it, and
I'm not minimizing.
access to it. Do you
Dude,
understand the potential of what a coronal mass ejection will do to this planet?
Oh, 100%, and that's why people like Elon
It's
Musk
going to be
have built Starship.
a CME, coronal mass ejection will make Mad Max look like the future, like science
Well,
fiction.
Well, regardless, I mean, then you're into prepper territory, and that's a different podcast, you know. So then you've got to plan for that. But I'm just simply saying, about talking about the underlying financial system, assuming we all have electricity and internet, you know, and that's the. So here's the thing:
bare now.
is
Oh,
there it is,
He's showing us the Beanie Baby.
Chris. I guess what I'm saying is you have to prepare for multiple variables, right? So the thing we're talking about is what's going to happen to fiat currency. Now, gold would be another thing. It could just as easily, I think it's going to be a combination of assets. You have electronic assets and you have commodities, right? So this is just diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, don't be like me. Is basically what he's saying. Because I'm 100% in on Bitcoin at the moment.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would
it's a safe bet.
I would buy some gold, Jace.
Yeah.
I think you're both right. I'm going to say both of you are correct.
Yeah. So question, because we only have like 12 minutes left. This podcast was an emergency podcast, essentially about Bitcoin and getting you to better understand it. Chris, where are you at after this conversation? Are you not moved? Has the needle moved at all? Are you gone one way or the other? Or are you still at the same exact place?
If I had to have a score of 100 to say, I want to be just like Jace. I'm not talking about the Cybertruck. I'm just talking about the Bitcoin. If I had to have
I
a
know you don't want to
score,
be like my Cybertruck.
if I had to have a score of 100 to be just like Jace, Bitcoin, I started at like a 20 out of 100.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I understand the mechanics of it. I just don't. It still doesn't make sense. I would say my needle has moved to a 25.
That hurts. It hurts.
That's an increase of 20 of
It's a 20%
25% on my end.
Yeah.
It's not a lot to you. It's a lot to me. Let's understand math. I went from 20 to 25. You want me to get to 100. And I'm still.
No. I want you to get to 50. If I can get the world to 50, that means they understand the why.
Can
Right?
we qualify it this way, though, which is to say, do you at least understand the underlying reasoning and rationale better for why?
What you said earlier, Sam, that there will only ever be what is the number? What's the maximum number of
21
Bitcoins?
million.
21 million. Perfect number, makes perfect sense. That's the number I would have chosen too. I get that it can only be that until somebody says, yeah, but we're gonna have 42.
Nope. That's what. This is what's crazy about Bitcoin. This is the thing that it's like a tattoo. Okay, it's permanent, right? It's permanent. It's on you forever. Okay. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin because that is what's coded into the protocol. This is a public protocol with thousands of nodes that have general consensus running the same exact code, block after block, churning, can't be changed. Because here's what happens if it changes. Let's say you fork it. What you're talking about is we're going to fork the protocol, okay? To fork it and do exactly what you're saying. That is possible. You can fork it, and it's already happened. There's other protocols called Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision. Those are Bitcoin forks. And based on consensus and consensus alone, the general population has chosen its winner. They didn't go to Bitcoin Cash. They didn't go to Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision. They didn't go to any other altcoin, because you can create a cryptocurrency out of thin air right now, and you can say, hey, this is the one we're using this one. We're going to use this one. All right. This has 1 billion tokens on it. This goes to Sam's point of consensus.
Right.
This is the one that society's chosen, and because we've chosen it, we all mutually agree upon it. That is now our token of choice.
The same way we mutually agree on the dollar as a reserve currency today.
And gold.
And that's why, even though Sam initially said Bitcoin is mutually agreed upon, that's why Jace is still excited that Microsoft is moving in on it, that Florida is. So I will say that when you started getting excited about that, in my head, red flag went off and said, well, wait a second. Why are you excited about these people adopting when Sam already said it was mutually agreed upon?
It's the largest cryptocurrency
question.
has not been mutually agreed upon by everyone. It is the most mutually agreed upon cryptocurrency, but cryptocurrency still has a large way to go. We're entering now the tipping point where, the Malcolm Gladwell idea, you have the early adopters, and then what happens is at a certain point that domino flips over, and then all the laggards start to adopt, and then and this is where Pandora's box opens, right? And then it goes from skeptical thing to thing that is like it makes the leap. It goes from a 20% early adoption to 80%, and everyone's then like, it's just it becomes obvious, right? And then you still have the Luddites at the background who have not adopted it, right? The same way you have certain people who have not adopted cell phones and they still use rotary phones or whatever they want to use. You still got those people in the background, but at a certain point, the iPhone went from the cool new toy to ubiquitous. And crypto has not made that leap yet.
And something I want to point out too, this is very, 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 very important. All right. I talked about both political parties basically dipping their toe in the water, right? Saying one's more, and I did say that one party is more bullish than the other, right? I'm going to put out a Trump policy, right? That is very important to know. Okay. If Trump wins, okay, if that happens, he's creating a Bitcoin reserve. That is one of his publicly stated agendas. A Bitcoin reserve. What is that Bitcoin reserve going to be for? We don't know. But we know that the United States government is actively going to start buying Bitcoin. And in history, to date, that hasn't happened, right? So is that the tipping point? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it'll be Grand Theft Auto 6, which has publicly announced that there will be a crypto aspect to that game where it will get more people involved in microtransactions to propel the crypto agenda. So there's all these little micro things that are happening within our society that are going to yield a public perception and adoption of crypto, whether or not they want to or not.
So what is the, I'm going to back up a little bit here. What is the market cap of crypto today? Can you calculate that?
I think
it's like 10 trillion actually. And then so there's a coin
we'll do coinmarketcap.com.
Yep, that's it.
So
let's have a look.
And then another interesting question is, what is the GDP, if you will? What is the value of all currency on the planet today, minus crypto? And then what would the price per coin have to go to if you had your max 21? And I think you're naive for saying it'll never go past 21, because I know how times 2 works. Somebody's going to do it. Just admit it.
But Chris, think about this. There's a vested interest, right? So this, I'm going to change your mind on this. I'm certain of it. If people have a vested interest in a currency, right? And it's a global consensus. Remember, like, these are people running individual nodes. All right. If you do what you're talking about, it will devalue Bitcoin immediately. People will be like, wow, I don't believe in this anymore. And the
Well,
value would
that's
drop.
how we got into this.
And what's been happening to our dollar?
Yeah,
No, but you see what I'm saying? People have a vested interest.
we're a
because
long
the
way away
government
from
doesn't-
that. Chris, buy low, sell high.
But Sam, by saying that, you sound like the guy named, Bob Fenwick, who was leaving the train from Jekyll Island. You know the whole train story, going, hey, what if somebody just decides to make spare dollars, and everybody else going, that'll never happen.
No. I think you're right. I think it could happen. I'm not gonna, but I'm just saying it's gonna be a minute before that happens, and we're gonna have a whole adoption phase that happens the same way we had 100 years of the American dollar, or at least tethered to the gold standard. So I think we've got a minute before what you're talking about is disrupted, and a lot of money to be made by Bitcoin being scarce before what you're talking about happens.
I know we're about to wrap up here, but I want to leave you with one little history story that I just learned recently. And I'm curious as to know whether you guys do, and you're both super smart. You're way smarter than me. Do you know what happened in 1933, April 15th in the United States?
I do not know.
Roosevelt made it illegal
Oh yeah.
Oh, I know this.
for U.S. citizens to hold gold, other than like your wedding ring and maybe a couple of coins.
Totally forgot about
Illegal,
Bitcoin.
punishable by adjusted for inflation, almost $250,000 fine and 10 years in prison. So people were taking their gold, melting it down, and literally putting it in their mattresses and stuff like that. And that did not revert until two things had to happen. One, Nixon took us off the gold standard. And then when Gerald Ford became president, he said, yeah, you guys can have as much gold as you want.
So
Valid.
you take this. You take this one, Sam.
40
'Cause
years.
Chris,
And that sounds crazy.
Here's
that
the thing.
the government
You're
is
right.
going to tell you can't hold gold. And yet for 40 years in our country, that happened.
Yeah, 100%. And you know what? That could happen again. And they could either do it to gold, they could do it to Bitcoin, they could do it to any asset to impoverish the American public. And that's why, like at a certain point, you have to make a move. We could do the forever into time, what if this happens, right? But for me,
Yeah.
I'm like, well, if this happens, then you need your backup plan. It's a workaround. Like in post-production, you need plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, right? So what you're saying is, well, what if this happens? We're like, well, if that happens, okay, then you're going to have a certain amount of window to move some of your Bitcoin so that you can buy gold with it, right? Because they haven't outlawed that. But then what if they do it to Bitcoin and gold? Well, then you're like, all right, I guess I got to buy soybeans, right? Because that's what's going to happen there. There is going to always be some form of wealth that people are going to be able to use in society. So you just have to forever look at the tea leaves and make the best guess you can make given the variables and circumstances you're in. 26. So 42.
I just moved from a 25 to a 26, Jace. I'm a little bit closer.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to nudge you a little bit more and more. Just a little bit more and more. I'm just over here just thinking about what you just talked about, though, in terms of seizing assets, right? And this last thing I'll say is that
the U.S. government didn't seize the gold. They bought it for $20 an ounce. And then after they had everybody's gold, they raised the price to $35 an ounce. And the description that I read said that was the U.S. government's way of paying off World War I or something like that.
So my only thing for you to think about, right, is gold is a tangible thing that you can hold in your hand, right? And that's why a lot of people like it.
Cool.
Bitcoin is a series of numbers and digital seed phrase, right? So if the government tells me that Bitcoin's illegal, do you know how many people on planet Earth are going to say they lost in a boating accident? And there's nothing that can prove that they did. As long as you can memorize your seed phrase, right? You don't even need a physical piece of paper. You don't even need No, but this is very important.
I got you.
I can travel. Chris, I need you to really think about this. I can hop on a plane right now. Okay, I don't have $1 billion, but in theory, I could hop on a plane with $1 billion stored inside my head.
Like Johnny Mnemonic.
That's all I need. Literally can travel across borders with that, and nobody can take it from me.
Do you know that reference,
Sam?
Sam?
From you. I mean, come on. Keanu Reeves is one of the greatest actors of all time. If you're going to try pop culture, you're going to have to go way earlier than the.
I didn't see that movie, but I do know it's a Keanu Reeves film.
Sam had a weird look. Like I don't know what that means. So in the movie Johnny Mnemonic, they shoved data into his brain, some sort of bio blah blah, and then he had to transfer the data to another country, and then but he had a time limit to take the data out of his brain or it would kill him. So Sam memorizing his seed phrase.
So there you go. We got to memorize your seed phrase. No wallets, no crypto, no whatever it is. And then wait 40 years for it to become legal again, or until after they paid off their debt. And you've got a winner. And then buy gold in the background. And then carry cash, physical cash, so that when the MPE hits, you can use physical currency if you haven't been burned out by the sun.
Okay, wow. So closing thoughts. Closing thoughts, Chris Fenwick. Where are you at? Give us the final number.
My biggest concern is that Jace moves a little closer to his microphone when he speaks. But other than that,
I'm having a good time.
I totally agree with you guys that diversity is important. I am, as a guy who's about to turn 62 years old, I am comforted by the fact that you two guys understand as much as you do. It makes me feel better about the future. And I think next April we're going to take a field trip if you want to go, Jace.
I'll be there. You know I like to camp, and you can make fun of my Cybertruck in person.
No. I mean, well, first of all, we're gonna have my special secret meeting at NAB. Sam, you're welcome to come too.
Let's go.
And then maybe we'll go find a gold shop and buy some gold.
All right, down.
Here's the deal.
It'll be fun.
Actually, I think this is good. I found out how we're going to bridge the gap here. Jace, you're going to go with Chris to buy some gold. Afterwards, okay. Chris, you're going to let Jace help you buy some Bitcoin.
We'll sit in Jace's Cybertruck with his Starlink, and you'll teach me you'll tell me the best wallet to get or whatever.
No, you'll both go to the gold store, right? Jace is going to buy some gold with Bitcoin. And Chris, you're going to take some proceeds from gold and buy Bitcoin.
This is all great. Okay. This is good stuff. I'm happy.
That's it.
Well, guys,
win-win.
On that note, I think that's a great episode. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you here next time on the ELAV8 podcast when we decide to actually come back. Emergency podcast out.
Coming back soon.